set?
I'm set. I'm going.
As I say, I may have to interrupt you at some stage to change back.
What's it? You just plugged in.
Oh wait, just this. Yeah, his.
No, that's mine. That's mine.
No, his.
That thing on the floor.
Oh, is it? Come on. Thinking whether that's because the only thing is is you can try not to knock it when you're.
It wasn't his fault. It was my fault.
I'm ready when you are, really.
All right, terrific.
Hang on a second. Okay.
All right, excellent. So Martin, I'd like to begin by thanking you for the time and for the privilege of speaking to you today. As one of the most respected and recognized experts on the history of World War II, I'd like to ask, how would you characterize the efforts of Pope Pius XII in dealing with the issues that he had to confront at that terrible time in history?
The Pope was in a very difficult situation.
Sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt because I'll have to flip it to your tie because otherwise
It didn't come through?
no, it's fine. Sorry.
So I don't need to read the question again?
No,
right?
no.
Okay, fine. So he just has to start.
Yeah. That would be better, I think.
I gotta stop coughing.
Yeah.
Like, I've only got from there,
I can't help it.
so it's not.
You know,
I don't see
yeah,
It's
dust. All right, one second.
Maybe go downstairs.
One big cough.
okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Okay, you can continue from that point. Thank you.
The Pope was in a very difficult situation. One forgets that after the 1st of September 1939, Nazism was dominant in Europe. With each conquest, Scandinavian countries, Norway, Denmark, France, Belgium, Holland, German power increased, and the power of the Gestapo to wreak vengeance on any opponent or anybody who was thought to be acting against the Nazi ideology was enormous. The Pope had responsibility for the whole Catholic community of Europe, and from September 1939, 30 million Polish Catholics were under the heel of tyranny. So anything that emerged from the Vatican might endanger their lives, and he had to walk this extraordinary tightrope between his own feelings, conscience, moral stand, and the lives of Catholics throughout Europe.
Which one of your books would you say specifically deals with this particular papal actions, for example? Did you have any books, special editions books that you've written about this time that specifically identify the actions of the Pope?
My book, The Righteous, which is about the Christian unsung heroes of the Holocaust, deals country by country with the reaction of the Catholic churches and of individual Catholics and of the Pope and the Vatican, and shows, I think, quite conclusively the tremendously brave role played by the Catholic Church in every country under German occupation, both to protect its own people, which was clearly a paramount necessity, to protect Catholics from persecution, and also to do what it could to try to mitigate the ferocity of the German racial policy against the Jews.
During our investigation, we interviewed Mr. Dan Kurzman, who was a journalist for Washington Post, former journalist. He's written a book on the kidnapping plot to kidnap the Pope, to kill the Curia, the Roman Curia, and to invade the Vatican, seize its assets. Are you aware of this plan in any way, or can you verify its accuracy, or share some of your knowledge of this particular incident?
I know nothing more about this devilish plan than I've read in Kurtzman's excellent book, which seems to me to be highly professional and well documented. Certainly it is not a plan beyond the imagination of the Nazis, who had many such plans to try to destroy those who they saw as their opponents.
So would you assume that this could very well probably have happened, even though there's very little documentation as we move forward to prove this? It seems reasonable, though.
It certainly seems reasonable. One has to search for more documentation, and as one discovers in all historical work, new documentation is emerging all the time, so it would not surprise me if something turned up to confirm this thesis.
Mm-hmm. As I mentioned, well, Dan Kurzman had actually interviewed General Karl Wolff, who was the commandant to Italy at the time and deputy to Heinrich Himmler, and he sets forth exactly how the general tried to avoid confronting the situation and forcing Hitler's hand, because he believed that it would have torn Germany in half. Almost half of Germany was Catholic, and would have been an enormously destructive situation. So many of the things that the Pope had done, from what we understand, were sort of playing on the fact that they were trying to avoid this conflict.
I think that the Pope and the Vatican had to be tremendously careful at every stage of the war not to make things worse for the Catholics of Europe, who were already suffering tremendously. It's a mistake to think that somehow the Vatican, by its very existence, protected the Catholics of Europe. The Nazis were actively and viciously hostile to any manifestation of Catholic values, and made great efforts to destroy, for example, in Poland, the leadership of the Catholic Church right down to the level of the village priest.
This is significant, and unfortunately eludes a lot of people. People may not be aware of this. We were told, we had one example of an early example of a papal outcry where the church spoke out through a pastoral letter from the Archbishop of Utrecht in Holland, where he protested the arrest of the Dutch Jews. And this was answered with an acceleration of arrests and an inclusion of all the Jews who converted to the Catholic faith. Are you aware of these events, and are you aware of any other examples of protests against the Nazi regime?
There are many examples of protests, particularly by Catholic leaders, by cardinals, by papal nuncios. And one of the things which I think runs through all these episodes, which are well documented, is that the Germans responded in the harshest possible way. And one of the things which many papal nuncios tried to do, on instructions from the Vatican, again and again, was at least to protect those Jews who had converted to Catholicism. And even this proved to be an uphill and dangerous task.
We have seen other situations about this, but are you aware of this particular pastoral letter from the Archbishop of Utrecht? Right. Because at this time it did cause an acceleration of arrests, which proved very, very detrimental anytime the Pope would speak out. Because one of the things that he's criticized about is that he did not speak out, and this is something that I think that we need to deal with. That every attempt that he did make to speak out was met with absolute devastation towards all of the refugees and all of the victims of the Nazis.
I think there's no doubt that the Nazi reaction to any protest, including papal protest and protest by Catholic leaders, was to accelerate the persecutions. There was no element of give and take. There was simply the element of persecution, and protest was always dangerous. That's why the concept which Yad Vashem, the Holocaust institution in Jerusalem, created many years ago now, of the righteous Gentile, is essentially to honor those who took these tremendous risks. It's not to honor people who would of course have been equally honorable, who demanded something, and that was achieved. It's to honour people who, at the risk of their lives and the risk of the lives of those for whom they were fighting, did try to speak out.
If we ultimately, the documentation does show that in fact there was a definite threat, not just against the Pope's life, but against the entire Catholic Church. Knowing this, he still moved behind the scenes to save Jewish lives, and this would qualify him for actually risking his life, although it would be in a, not quite like rowing a boat full of Jews, from one place to another, and saving individual Jewish lives, but it would, it may very possibly come to this, where he would be considered that he risked his life to do so.
I think the time has certainly come, in the light of what we now know, for the Pope to be put forward for nomination at Yad Vashem in the Department of the Righteous. It's a tough procedure, it's a judicial procedure, but it is a highly respected procedure, and the documentation is examined, and is examined by people who understand what the risks were, what the dangers were, and who are, of course, experts at reading the historical record.
Right. Now, speaking of Yad Vashem, I'd like to mention that in the new exhibit, which my wife and I visit every time we go to Jerusalem, just about, there's a portrait in the room of the world leaders. There's a portrait. They discuss all of the world leaders, Churchill and Roosevelt, and things that they did and they didn't do. Of course, the United States they didn't bomb the concentration camps or the railroad yards or the tracks going to the concentration. There are many things that could be certainly criticized that could have been done, and many people who did try to exodus Europe at the time were not permitted to leave enter the United States, Palestine, and so on. But I'd like to read a placard that's next to the Pope's picture, and I'd ask your opinion of this. It says, Pius XII's reaction to the murder of Jews during the Holocaust is a matter of controversy. In 1933, when he was Secretary of the Vatican State, he was active in obtaining a concordat with the German regime to preserve the Church's rights in Germany, even if it meant recognizing the Nazi racist regime. When he was elected Pope in 1939, he shelved a letter against racism and anti-Semitism that his predecessor had prepared. Even when reports of the murder of Jews reached the Vatican, the Pope did not protest either verbally or in writing. In December 1942, he abstained from joining the Allied declaration condemning the extermination of Jews. When the Jews were deported from Rome to Auschwitz, the Pope did not intervene. The Pope maintained his neutral position throughout the war, with the exception of appealing to the rulers of Hungary and Slovakia towards its ends. His silence and absence of guidelines obliged churchmen throughout Europe to decide on their own how to react. Do you think that this statement is correct? And if not, how would you correct it?
I think it needs correction in many aspects. And there's two I would like specifically to draw attention to. One is the reference to the Pope's active involvement in trying to help the Jews of Hungary in what the statement says was towards the end of the war. Actually, it was at the exact moment of the greatest danger to the Jews of Hungary, who until that moment had not been in danger. The Pope intervened at the very moment of the deportation of Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz, and intervened effectively, so effectively that the Hungarian regent, Admiral Horthy, told the SS general in charge of the deportations that they would have to stop. And they did stop. So that's an example in the plaque of really minimizing and in a sense belittling something which was of tremendous importance in the rescue of those Jews, who subsequently were protected by direct orders of the Pope, by his senior representative in Budapest, Angelo Rota, who organized the international community to save some 120,000 Jews by giving them the diplomatic protection of the Vatican and other diplomatic representatives in Budapest. The second point I'd raise, which I find quite dangerous in a way in terms of misrepresentation, is about the Pope's non-participation in the Allied declaration of the 17th of December 1942. This was the declaration which came to pass as a result of knowledge of the Holocaust reaching the West in detail, an Allied declaration protesting against the bestial crimes and pointing out that they were a deliberate attempt to exterminate the Jewish people. The Pope didn't and couldn't sign this declaration because he was not an ally. He was not at war with Germany. And had he in any way associated with the Allies, he would of course have put the Vatican, the whole papal establishment at immediate risk. He would have become an allied and therefore an enemy, and Germany and Italy were dominant. They were in charge of his little piece of territory. But what is left out in this plaque is that a week later, exactly a week later, in his Christmas message, the Pope made a declaration so extraordinary that I would like to quote the reaction of the senior Nazi hierarchy. This is a telegram.
What year was that, by the way?
December 1942.
Mm-hmm.
The declaration, the Allied declaration, which he did not and could not participate
Right.
in, was on the 17th of December, and the Pope's Christmas message was 7 days later. And this is what the Reich Security Main Office, that is the department in which Eichmann was a leading figure in Berlin, informed all its representatives in countries where there were Catholic populations. I quote, "In a manner never known before, the Pope has repudiated the National Socialist New European Order. Here, in this declaration, he is virtually accusing the German people of injustice towards the Jews and makes himself the mouthpiece of the Jewish war criminals."
I think that's very, very, very telling.
Can I just stop you a second? So Martin, can you just move the chair towards us a little bit? Because there's a shadow behind, and I just want to... That's a bit better, actually. Thank you. That's it. Sorry to interrupt.
All right. But I'd like to also mention some things that we had found out about this and ask your opinion about it. When he first discusses the letter from his predecessor, we believe that they're referring to the draft encyclical of Pius XI.
Right.
Now, it is our understanding this was a draft which not only was not read by Pius XI, it wasn't signed by him because he had died. This also doesn't say anything about the fact that 6 months after he did become Pope, he did issue his own encyclical condemning racism.
Right. But that's not mentioned in the plaque.
Not mentioned at all in the plot. Also, the fact that he did not protest either verbally or writing, this may very well be true because, as we were able to tell, that every time he did, would be worse. It would absolutely be worse for the Jews of the time. The fact that, and then the last part of this, where he says that his silence and absence of guidelines obliged churchmen throughout Europe to decide on their own how to react. In other words, what they're saying is the fact that he didn't speak out verbally, that every bishop, every cardinal, every archbishop, everybody throughout Europe had to act on their own to save Jewish lives. Now, how would you classify this statement? I mean, as far as accuracy is concerned.
Well, the Vatican archives are crucial here, and I believe that they show quite clearly that he was in constant communication with all his cardinals, and that their actions, that they had no ability really to act independently. I mean, they also informed him of what was happening and sought guidance, and my impression is, and this, as I say, is something the Vatican archives have to really reveal in detail, that it was a constant two-way process, and we see these protests taking place all the time, and we see essentially the leadership of the Catholic Church being active collectively.
the entire notion that these people would, that he was just sort of sitting quietly and not saying anything, leaving this up to the others, is just, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense based on the history of how the church operates and so on. And this is an important point. There was I wanted to also discuss the
Martin, sorry, just the papers rubbing against the mic. That's it. That's perfect.
these are things that we have found. We found some very, very interesting issues, situations behind the scenes that went on. And I wanted to discuss the idea of the archives, because this is something that we found. One of our interviews was with Monsignor Ferrafino, who personally was involved with receiving a doubly encrypted telegram from the Pope twice a year, instructing him to go around to General Trujillo to ask for permission for visas for 800 Jews per boatload. He had to be asked each time there were Jews coming. The point here is that all of the writings, many of the writings had to be destroyed. They had to be done by word of mouth. They had to be encrypted because of the fact that there was a threat against the Vatican, and that if they fell into the wrong hands, they would have seen exactly how this was happening, and it's something that we had to be very, very careful of. And I wanted your comments on this as well.
Well, I'm an archival historian, so I'm a great, I understand what archives contain and what they don't contain. And there's no doubt that this material is there, and the sooner it's made available, the better.
Right now, as we found, we interviewed Bishop Pagano, and he has assured us that as these become cataloged, because he said there are up to 30 million documents in hundreds of thousands of cases, and each time each section is available, they open it. They've already started opening many sections of the Secretary of State during the war years, so we're hoping to see this. But when I discussed this with some other churchmen, I said, what do you think is going to be found? They said they're going to find very little, only because things had to be destroyed. They could not leave any evidence, and they gave us an example. For example, in 1939, that the Pope interceded. The British, and this was in the British archives, that there were German generals that wanted to overthrow Hitler, and they wanted to see if they could negotiate a separate peace with Great Britain, and they said that there will be nothing in the Vatican to show this at all. But the British archives do have evidence of this.
I think if there are 30 million documents, everything will be there. I've never yet come across any regime, benign or malign, which didn't keep every scrap of paper.
All right, well...
So I'm confident.
Okay, wonderful. Very good. Now, I wanted to ask you a question that we discovered that up until the 1960s, all the Jewish newspapers, prominent Jewish religious leaders, world figures alike, praised the actions of the Pope and his efforts to save Jewish lives. In fact, the Roman Jews actually erected a marble monument thanking him for saving their lives. Then there was a complete reversal in the Jewish sentiment. What do you think caused this reversal?
I think that the expressions of thanks were very genuine, and that when someone like Golda Meir spoke, she meant it, because she knew that there had been these many initiatives of efforts to try to help Jews, including the Pope's Christmas message, which had so offended the Nazi hierarchy. Felt the Pope had allied himself with the Jewish world conspiracy, as they defined it. But there were then a number of books which were published. Actually, just when I was beginning my historical research and my historical career in the very early 1960s, which really sought to portray the Vatican in the most negative possible light, and culminating and centering around the play by Ralph Bochum, which was a tremendous success, and it was a play, it was a polemic. And of course that's why I try never to read fiction, try never to participate in fiction, but it was a powerful, dramatic presentation, an accusation, an indictment, without, of course, any attempt either to defend or to present the documentary evidence that existed. And one has to remember, and I use this in my own work as long ago as 1963-64, that the Vatican had published a substantial series of documents on the war years, which contained important information, which in a sense, if you study it carefully, does go against the thesis which Hockwood presented. But a play is very powerful. It became a controversial play, and unfortunately controversy tends to help the person who is making the accusations. That's what controversy really is about.
But you would say it has absolutely no basis in historical accuracy.
I didn't find the Hockwood play historical in any way. It was
Just a fictional play.
It was a powerful attempt to indict the Pope without really going into the issues which we now know a lot about, and some of which were known then, but much more is known now. Particularly the role of so many of the cardinals and papal representatives throughout the German-dominated Europe, again and again, to try to mitigate the persecution and to halt the deportations. The most powerful examples being the French cardinals desperately tried to stop the deportations from France in the summer of 1942, and the Pope himself, through his representative in Budapest, trying and succeeding in halting the deportations of Hungarian Jews to the death camps in the summer of 1944.
Do you know anything personally or about the background of Hochhof? No, nothing at all. We were told some interesting information. I wanted to ask you now on John Cornwell's book, the Hitler's Pope. Do you have any feeling about the accuracy of this account?
Well, I was very influenced by Rabbi Dallin's rebuttal of John Cornwell. I read Cornwell carefully and found it, again, rather like the Hochwood play, a powerful indictment, an attempt to indict, and not a balanced account. And the very title sets the reader on a certain course. And also I was quite offended by the photograph on the cover, certainly in the edition which I have, showing the Pope when he was papal nuncio in Germany, apparently going into some Nazi setting, and in fact it's before the Nazis.
This is the Weimar, yeah.
When Germany was a democratic republic.
We actually have Ron Rislak had done a PowerPoint on that, and they showed how they took the actual photograph, which showed a car from 1920s. I think 1928, and they phased out the door of the car, and they faded back. All you could see was the impression of a Nazi soldier, when in fact that was not a Nazi. It was prior to the Nazi regime even started. But this was the sort of thing. Now, would you say that this would be probably, now why would you think that the Jewish sentiment changed so dramatically based on these plays, or do you think anything concrete actually was discovered, or because it just doesn't make sense to have a complete reversal like this. And I'd like to, if you permit me, I'd like to read some of the statements that were made by some very prominent Jewish leaders. Joseph Lichten had said, and he talked about, he said, we share the grief of the world over the death of His Holiness Pope Pius XII. During the 10 years of Nazi terror, when our people passed through the horrors of martyrdom, the Pope raised his voice to condemn the persecutors and to commiserate with their victims. Excuse me, that was said by Golda Meir. I'm sorry. Joseph Lichten had made a previous statement, but that was Golda Meir's statement. Also, Nachum Goldman, who was the president of the World Jewish Congress, he says, it's with special gratitude we remember all he has done for the persecuted Jews during the darkest period of our entire history. Rabbi Elio Tuaf, the chief rabbi of Rome, said, more than anyone else, we have had the opportunity to appreciate the great kindness filled with compassion and magnanimity of the Pope that the Pope displayed during the terrible years of persecution and terror. And Albert Einstein, that said, only the Catholic Church protested against the Hitlerian onslaught on liberty. Up until then, I had not been interested in the church, but today I feel a great admiration for the church, which alone had the courage and struggle, the courage to struggle for spiritual truth and moral truth. I'm forced thus to confess that what I once despised, I now praise unreservedly. Excuse my reading, but these are statements, and I remember when the Pope was alive. I'm old enough to remember, and I remember the feeling about it. But then, as I was getting older, when I was close to after I was bar mitzvah and so on, we saw this change, and this is the thing that's so remarkable, because it's as though he's demonized today, and he's despised, and I think that this is something that this is why we're investigating this, and we're trying to sort of put the record straight.
I think it's very important to try to put the record straight with regard to Pius XII. I do have a general historiographic point to make, if I can, as a professional historian, and that is that in the last 30 years, after, as it were, Golda Meir's very strong recognition of Pius XII's achievements, since then there has been a general tendency among Jewish historians, and a tendency which I understand, to try to find enemies other than Hitler and the Nazis, to try to create a situation where the Jewish people were alone, where nobody helped them, where their enemies were all around, not just in Berlin, but in London and Washington. For some reason Moscow is left out, but in Moscow, and that the Allies, as they're called, were the principal obstacle to the saving of Jewish life, and indeed were, as I've seen in a number of books, somehow complicit in the Holocaust. And of course the Pope fits very easily and attractively into that pattern. Curiously, Yitzhak Rabin, who was a very great Israeli leader, was one of those who saw that there was something wrong in this attempt to say, we are a people who have never had any friends, and who at our greatest hour of need were surrounded by enemies, including the Allied camp and including by the Pope. I think this is changing because more and more is being discovered about just how much the Allies did do, how much they did try to do, even with regard to the bombing of Auschwitz, and certainly with regard to the refugees. It's been said that, for example, no Jews were allowed to escape from Europe to Palestine. In fact, Winston Churchill established a system which I describe in my new book, Church and the Jews, whereby any Jew who managed to escape from Nazi Europe could proceed immediately to Palestine on a collective passport, irrespective of any pre-war quotas. So the Pope has certainly been caught up, if you like, in this historiographic time frame, time capsule of blaming everybody except, ironically, the Nazis and the SS. It's a phenomenon which I think is passing, but certainly it should pass.
It's interesting because you would imagine history to be reported perfectly and accurately, but in fact it seems to be in waves. It changes one way and it's not accurate, and it's not. It's surprising. It's apparently this is the case then.
Nations and people constantly rewrite history to fit in with their current situation, their current fears and their current perspectives. But there is such a thing as true history. And I was much influenced myself by a former fellow of my own Oxford College, Merton College, Oxford, Bishop Mandel Crichton, who wrote the great multi-volume history of the popes. And I remember going to see his grave as a young fellow of Merton, starting on my historical career, and there, to my surprise, engraved on his tombstone were the words, "He tried to write true history." I believe there is such a thing as true history, and I think that in this question of Pius XII, the time has come that it should be written.
Excellent. I'd like to discuss something that we recently found, which we were sort of surprised about. We were told about a situation where the Pope had intervened in order to help save Jewish lives for Jews escaping Europe and going to the Dominican Republic. And this is a very, very significant time, because it was certainly everybody does acknowledge that this occurred, but they don't acknowledge why General Trujillo permitted this to happen. Right now, as we speak, there's in the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York is an exhibit specifically on this particular time, and yet it stops very short. Just says the Dominican people welcome Jews. But I'm going to let you know about something that happened that we had recently discovered through our investigation, and the personal testimony of a 96-year-old priest, who, by the way, is as sharp as can be. But he worked directly under papal instructions as the secretary to the Apostolic Nuncio to the Dominican Republic. He was responsible for secretly shuttling Jewish refugees from Portugal and Spain to the Dominican Republic from 1939 to 1945. What they would do is they would shuttle no more than, usually two or more boats a year. They would get this one boat, and it was something Pinto. It was an old World War I boat. And they would they would leave from Portugal, and prior to the departure of that boat, they would get a doubly encrypted telegram from the Apostolic Palace that he would have to take. He would first decipher it, and he was saying in his interview, he says, well, it was written in a language, they weren't sure if it was French, it wasn't French, but it was this, and you had to take this letter off, and they actually deciphered the telegram. And then he would have to personally drive it around with the Apostolic Nuncio, not the Archbishop not the religious leader, but the Nuncio, the Vatican's ambassador to the Dominican Republic, would have to drive a day and a half from Port-au-Prince to see General Trujillo, and he would have to present the telegram, and then he would say that I'm asking for these visas in the name of Pope Pius XII. And Trujillo would repeat it. This is being done in the name of the Pope. He says, yes, in the name of the Pope. This happened, as I said, from 1939 to 1945. And this is an enormous example of help. And this particular priest also mentions that out of 800 Jews, there were 7 Christians on board. He was one of them, and that he was with them occasionally, and he would be with the Pope personally. And when the Pope would say he would be with the Pope, and the Pope would slam his hand on his knees. We have to do something to help the Jews. Very, very important information, because what it shows is that there was an enormous amount of things occurring at this time, going behind the scenes, that you wouldn't hear about, because it had to be done undercover, it had to be done covertly. Now, do you know of any other examples like this that you think that the Vatican had, where they interceded? I know that you mentioned before with Hungary and so on, where they tried to intercede to save Jewish lives.
Certainly they tried to intercede in Slovakia, and they tried to intercede in Croatia. The papal nuncio in Croatia, in Zagreb, was particularly active, and of course the Croat regime was a fascist regime, so he was really battling against considerable local opposition, but he did so, and he did so effectively.
I'd like to just go back very briefly to what we had mentioned before, that with this potential threat against the Pope, where in Dan Kurzman's book, what we have more or less come to realize, I think, here is that when I've discussed it with other people who have absolute knowledge of this has been absolutely confirmed by the Vatican, and Father Gumpel in particular, has said that he did not do this out of fear. In fact, what the Pope had done is that he had started establishing a government in exile. And he made statements that if they're going to take me out of here, they're going to drag me out of here. So I'm not going voluntarily. So he started preparing a government in exile. But his primary concern, and this is very logical, was that if he's arrested, and if the Vatican is invaded, the sovereignty of the Vatican state and the neutrality will have been compromised, and that every Jew being held in every Catholic church, monastery, and convent throughout Europe would have been immediately arrested, and their Catholic caretakers, endangering not just the Jews who were being saved, and the thousands, tens of thousands of Jews, but also the people that were taking care of them. what would you say about this scenario? Because this, I mean, it just rings very true to me when you think about it logically, that this would be an enormous concern of his, why he would not try to provoke this arrest.
It was a very legitimate concern, because what Pius XII couldn't know was that in many Catholic countries, Catholics were already being executed for trying to help Jews. The extent of the execution of Polish Catholics didn't become known until after the war, and until a great deal of research had to be done after the war. The other thing which I think is much neglected is his personal role when the Germans occupied Rome, and not the Vatican, but they occupied Rome with its 8,000 Jews. And he took this incredible initiative, having been alerted in the early hours of the morning, took this incredible initiative whereby only 1,000 Jews remained the next day when the SS came to round them up. Some 7,000 had been given sanctuary, not only in Catholic institutions throughout the city of Rome, but in the Vatican itself, several hundred in the Vatican itself.
Because I have many friends in the Roman Jewish community, and they absolutely don't acknowledge this today. And in fact, there was a plaque, as I mentioned, there was a large marble plaque put up in Rome thanking the Pope for it, and that plaque disappeared. It's no longer in existence. There is a photograph of it, though. So this is another phenomenon where there's been a reversal here, and we certainly do have information as to exactly how he interceded when the princess had come to him early in the morning, and so on, and then he had interceded between the German the ambassador to the Holy See, and through his personal friendship with he had a close German priest who was a friend. Do you know of this particular, how he did intercede with the rest of the Roman Jews?
Yes, I've published in my book The Righteous quite a detailed account of that, and of course Sister Margarita has written a substantial account of it as well. My feeling is that all this material should be assembled, particularly, for example, the evidence you give of this man who intervened in the Dominican Republic, and it should be presented as quickly as possible to Yad Vashem, to the Department of the Righteous, which, when they get such evidence, open a file and make a very serious, independent, historical judicial inquiry. And certainly the evidence which exists now, I have thought, would be a very strong prima facie case for something being done. But it has to be done, particularly as you have this witness who's still alive in his 90s. It has to be done tomorrow rather than next week.
This is exactly the reason that Pave the Way Foundation is doing this. We intend to turn this over. I've been in touch with Yad Vashem, and we're going to turn it over to the Holocaust Memorial in New York and in Washington, D.C. on the same day. We're going to be assembling this now. Monsignor Ferrafino was videotaped, and you can see the expression, you can see the feeling when he slams his hand in his face. These are things that you cannot get when you're in written testimony. And that's why we're going around we're doing these video testimonies of people who are knowledgeable of this time. But I agree with you 100%. This needs to be done sooner rather than later, and this is why we are doing this now. I wanted to ask you also briefly about Rabbi Zoli. Now, as you're aware that he converted to Roman Catholicism, and he was the former chief rabbi of Rome. And when he was baptized, when he took his baptism, he took the name Eugenio, which was the name of Pacelli, to honor the Pope. Do you know? What would you say that this would be a strong support in the argument that he recognized what the Pope had done to save the lives of Roman Jews and to help during the war? The fact that he took his name and that he did. I know this is, look, the conversion, this is something that this is not a pleasant thing for us. Normally, when we hear of such a thing, such an event, especially for a chief rabbi, but the fact that he did this, let us not deal with the fact that he converted. Let's deal with the fact that he took the name of the Pope and so on. Do you have any information about this or speculation? Nothing at all.
I'm not a speculative.
But I'd like to close with this. I want to know if you have any other reflections or events of the war years that you can help us with, and how the Vatican functioned with its relations with the Jewish people, and not just those who converted to Catholicism, but the Jewish people. Do you have any other examples that we can use?
Well, in my book, The Righteous, I must have 100 examples of Catholic churchmen, senior Catholic churchmen, cardinals, papal representatives, active in every country, and taking a lead and taking risks and speaking out publicly. And then the extraordinary case of the Pope himself playing a major part, the leading part, in saving more Jews in Rome, percentage-wise, than was saved in any other capital city except Budapest, which was also a papal initiative.
Mm. Well, first I want to thank you very much for your time, and I would I'll let you know as this progresses. You will also receive some of this information. I think that's very, very important that you have this. You'll have copies of all the videos we've shot, DVDs of them, and we're getting documents as well, because as documents are being made available to us, we are getting them, and we're going to be able to show them.
I'd appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I
And
wish you luck in your work.
thank you very, very much.
Pleasure.
Right, I'm afraid we're going to have to do some sort of outtakes.
Yes.
Not outtakes, because there were no outtakes, which is great. Okay, yes, you
So
don't need that now.
background.
My problem is that I ask questions that are not on this list.
Yeah, well, that's the only thing.
Yeah.
Will you hear the questions?
The only thing is, well, I can hear them, but they might not be that happy with the quality, because it's a bit muffled over there. With the first question, or the first answer, you were quite close to the background there, and you could see the shadow, which I wasn't that happy about. I don't know whether there's anything you can do with the first question. Would you be able to redo that, or not?
No, why don't we just, I think...
Well, not the question, but the answer. Are you happy with that?
No, I wouldn't worry about the shadow. No, I think it's what he's saying.
I think
Yeah.
it's
You
spontaneous.
Sure? Okay.
And what we can do is when they're editing, perhaps they can focus more. Maybe they.
Yeah,
Can,
maybe they can do something with that.
yeah.
All right.
I don't want to disturb them with take any more of your time.
When they edit, can they come closer in the as
Well,
editing?
they can do one of these days, so they
Or
probably
you
can
can do.
Well, I won't be
They say
editing.
they, right?
Actually, it's being done in Rome.
Right.
He's not
Yeah,
doing it.
I'm not doing
I'm
that.
taking the raw
I'm
footage
very
back to
glad.
But
Rome.
what I do need to do is
I'm
get
working
some,
my best
right,
for
some
that.
nodding
They
shots.
probably
You don't
do.
need the mic
Nodding.
anymore. Thank you very much.
How are you? I'm Gary.
Good,
Crowe.
I'm Esther.
How are you?
Sorry.
So how was? You had a nice
I-
vacation?
Yes,
I was
yeah.
impressed by how you slept.
Yes, you just had a-
Were you listening at all outside?
No,
So we have to
I
read this.
figured,
Did Ben come?
I don't
Yeah,
know. I'll
he
probably
left.
be able to do these
He
because
I
I
sent
really
him off.
ad-libbed it.
I
Is it
know,
all right?
I know, but maybe you can abbreviate,
yeah.
or do them.
He'll see you when he gets back,
Can
but
you
he
do
may
that?
call you this afternoon.
And did Ellen?
Yeah,
Because they'll need some questions.
Not yet.
Yeah.
They'll need you doing something.
All right, I can try.
Okay, we can nod at
Yeah,
each
let's
other.
do some nods first.
Okay.
Okay.
What are you doing?
Let's the camera's behind you there. By the way, were you behind that camera like that? That we?
I was like that.
Oh, okay.
But, I
That's
hope.
your
yeah.
private.
That's my little camera. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope that I wasn't.
Have a
in the way.
picture of your jeans.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry about that.
But this is where we really hope. I'm inviting Irina Steinfeld. I'm inviting many of the people
Right.
from Yad
Well,
Vashem.
they know Irina Steinfeld well.
Good.
Yes, she's a good friend of ours actually.
Aw, great.
She's lovely. She's lovely. We actually have a lot of friends in Israel. We're in Israel
Do that again.
6 or 7 times a year.
So what is your organization?
What is it?
Yeah,
Do you have a brochure?
I do.
Oh, here. I have one.
Man has never known great.
We work between all the religions in eliminating obstacles. We don't deal in theology. So we have some very large gestures between the faiths. So,
uh-huh.
for example, we brought the writings of Maimonides to Israel for the first time from the Vatican Library. We also just recently gave the Pope the most important Christian manuscript in the world as a gesture.
Mhm.
We were able to obtain a donor to acquire this.
What was it? What was
The
it?
Bodmer Papyrus, the Gospels of John and Luke,
Wow.
written in the year 175.
Run your finger along where you're reading.
Right, in a manner never known before, the Pope has repudiated the National Socialist New European model. Here he is virtually accusing the German people injustice of the Jew and makes himself the mouthpiece of the Jewish war criminals.
That's great. Okay. Now, what we need to do is.
Very interesting.
We have, but we have many projects that we do like this. But what we do is identify obstacles,
Mm-hmm.
not theological obstacles. We don't deal in theology at all. But in this particular case, certainly the impression, the Jewish problem with Pius XII is very, very important. This is 1.2 billion Catholics, 16 million Jews, which we need to try to help alleviate this and bring it back to the way it was. We have enough enemies today that we don't need to be creating some.
Right,
And this
right.
is actually a major cause of anti-Semitism within the Catholic Church, that a lot of people
Gary?
very object to this.
Can I just ask you to move your chair, sort of, so we don't, yeah, like that. That's fine.
Yes,
Yeah.
but some of the projects that we've had are fantastic and enormous success. It's really Mary and I. This
Okay, what I
connection's really
need
two
you
of
to
us.
do, Gary, sorry, Sir Martin, if you could just move forward a little, that's fine.
It's, you know, so it's a, I'm very, very gratified by some of these things. The Maimonides loan, for example, the Vatican had never ever loaned these manuscripts to Israel before, and we made the inquiry with the Israel Museum.
Right.
And this exhibit took place, and it started, and what happened, it sort of opened the door, because then Israel loaned back to the Vatican a Rembrandt and a Botticelli for the 600th anniversary of the, you know, and what it does is it's these are gestures, is what these are.
Right.
But we also have relations with every religious leader in the Holy Land.
Can I just get you to nod?
Yes.
Just
Me?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
nods. Yeah. A few, you'll need to do quite a few.
I need a lot of nods.
And different
Can I talk while I'm
expressions.
nodding?
I'd rather you didn't.
No.
Because this is the time when Sir Martin's speaking, okay. So.
I'm nodding, right.
You don't, yeah, well actually it's not
I can't smile either.
bad. Yeah, I think now and again it's okay.
You're making me laugh. The-
That's good. Actually, Sir Martin, if you can move your head a little bit. just
Yes,
slightly.
right. So I'm talking and I'm nodding.
Yeah. Talking heads, they said that the talking heads. We actually, we worked with the Greek patriarch, getting his affirmation. Worked against the government, not against the government, but there was a private group that was sort of holding this up for 2 years. They were trying to, you know, the Greek church is the largest real estate owner in Israel.
Right.
And what it was effectively, you know, this is a case of religious freedom, is what it is. So we succeeded. I actually wrote letters to the Chief Justice, Dorit Banish, and she actually did what we said to do.
Good.
And the patriarch attributed this to us, the success. And so he told me, he says, let me tell you what I'm doing for your Jews. The patriarch said this. He said, as the Catholic Church has removed its anti-Semitism from its liturgy, this is what we are trying to start to do now. Which is this is dynamic. It's important. So what we do is we try to create a very, very much better relationship between the faiths, at least in the common message. Our goal ultimately is to remove the name of religion to be used as private
Can you
private
just,
agendas.
Yeah.
Sorry, Gary.
Yeah.
Can you just nod again?
Not smiling?
Not
Yeah.
talking.
You're responding to
Fine,
his,
that's
yeah.
fine.
I have to be, you're nodding
Yes,
at what I'm
that's
Yeah,
saying.
it. If
My
you could
wise word.
gesticulate, that's
You're
perfect, Sir
responding to
Martin.
him.
Very
And-
true.
Any animation
Brilliant.
was good.
Very profound.
Sorry, I know they're painstaking, but it's just important. Otherwise, it's just a very static.
Well, it gives them the option of cutting
Yeah.
back to
Exactly.
me talking to you,
Exactly.
nodding to you, talking me, nodding.
It's actually much easier if you talk to me than you can listen to
Then
me.
you can nod.
That is actually better, isn't it?
Right. So anyway, this is my study, this is my powerhouse here,
Yes.
working place, and it's even warming up. Turned on the heating.
Okay, I think that's fine. Now we just need the questions. I'm afraid.
What happened to Esther?
She's walking around the treasure house. If we have, I'm going to let you know, we are going to have some ability to get some into the archives, I think.
Good, good. Yeah, that's
Privately.
important.
So, it'll be wonderful if you can come to Rome.
Right.
It's not that long a trip from here. For me, it's a little more different.
Right.
But I'm there maybe 8 or 9 times a year. I'm
Oh,
there
wow.
almost every month.
So where are you based? In New
New York, yeah.
New York, right.
Yeah. So we
And why is the mailing address in Florida? Is that just?
No, that's not Florida,
No,
that's
it's Long Beach.
Long Beach.
Oh, Long Beach. I thought.
That's
I
on
thought-
Long Island.
Oh, right. Oh, yes, that's near.
Yeah, it's on Long Island, and but
So Martin, if you just look up.
so it would be.
Are the direct flight? There must be direct flights to Rome from you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Alitalia or?
Alitalia. I'm back. I even know all the stewardesses. But it's
It's a night flight.
yes.
Yeah, that's all right. That's
I can't sleep on a plane, so it's a disaster for
it.
me.
Right.
It's these are
One, couple of shots from here.
Yeah.
yes.
Do you have to? Do they have to film you
I could try. I can.
reading the
You
questions?
can try.
I don't think you need to.
Well, the problem is that you really can't hear them clearly, and I'll try to restate them a little bit. I'll try.
So Martin, do you mind staying for this? Only
What?
that it's quite good to have your hair in the shot. Not the back of your head, just a little bit of your hair. Otherwise, it looks like you've
But
gone
you know,
home.
what we're doing is I'm trying to do the symposium that's, where we're going to have 3 days. Well, and I have about 100 prominent Jewish leaders that we'd like to invite to attend, including the chief rabbinate,
Right.
the representatives, my friend Lawrence Schiffman, Professor Schiffman. Larry Schiffman's a good friend, and there were a number of people, the Jewish Publication Society, people who are fair-minded, who are just going to listen to this, and rabbis,
Yeah.
prominent Rabbi Riskin, and in September, and then we want to conclude it with a private audience with the Pope on the 18th. I'm going to invite you to come, and I know that it may or may not be possible for you, but I'd love if you can come to be part of the panel to answer questions.
Now you're going to. Now this is you asking the question.
I'm
You're
asking the
gonna be
questions
asking
now.
questions now.
All right, I'll try to do the best I can. My problem is that I kept thinking of things, and then I'd ask you afterwards. And I don't remember what I.
Hopefully the answers can fit into.
Well, that's why I'm saying perhaps you should just film you asking one or two of the questions.
Well, no, what we could do is we'll do that, and then we can maybe I can do it again. When they actually edit it. I'm in Rome,
Right.
so maybe we can just redo the sound or
Yeah,
something.
that may be better than trying. That might be better than
And
trying
it has
to.
to be the same studio.
Yeah,
though,
right.
Otherwise,
That's
it's going
true
to look
too.
very odd.
I could read the questions, right? John,
You can, yeah.
I have to. I'll try to do the best I can.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think there's any problem with that. I mean,
The problem is that your questions are about as long as his
if you
interview.
can, maybe
Short.
shorten them slightly.
If you had
Even
looked
though
over
that's
at me, I was going like that.
Actually, I wish you would do this and not me. You really
It's
should do.
okay. It's okay. Well, then we'd have to redo the entire. Which I don't think they could match my face to your voice.
Yeah, you're
I
right,
don't.
you're right. The Yad Vashem thing is a big issue. This placard. I
Are
mean,
they
it's-
going to change it or?
They're gonna. It's, the problem is are they gonna do it voluntarily? My issue here is that I don't want to put them in an embarrassing situation, and the reason that I'm so forceful about this is because we're confronted with so many Holocaust deniers today that the absolute accuracy of everything in that memorial has to be paramount. And here is something that's obviously wrong. It's just plain incorrect. There was no letter from the predecessor. That this is nonsense. It just, and the fact that these statements are made just calls into question this particular thing. Well, what about some of the other exhibits, when we have people who are denying that the Holocaust ever existed? And we always say go to Yad Vashem and look, but yet, here the accuracy is being questioned.
Okay, so, hang on. Not set up. Just need.
Wait a minute, there's no mic here.
No, there is.
Oh, there it is. You want me to put it here, Fredo?
Not too close to your. I mean,
Okay.
you speak normally, won't you?
Yeah. Try to.
Normal volume. just test it.
Alright. How's the testing coming?
Yeah.
Don't you do Mary? I don't know if you. Well, sorry. You can turn off that camera. The other one.
Actually, can we move that camera
Yeah.
away?
Turn it off and get rid of it. Just turn the switch off.
Obstacle course.
I know. Let me see. I don't think I would know how to turn this camera.
I think just move it
Okay, which way are we going?
that way.
Which way? That way.
That's perfect.
And then I'll figure out how to turn it off by the time. Am I in your way?
Very optimistic about this, supposedly. Because logical people, when they're confronted with this information, are going to be come up with logical answers. And I think that ultimately what we're doing is trying to change the course of the way Jewish